Right. So, hello and welcome. Today we are going to do a presentation of how some service could be modeled using minimal modeling, and we are going to use Twitter as an example. I'm going to share my screen. Right. We're going to use my minimal modeling account as an example. If you have any questions or comments, please type them in the chat, and I'm going to respond every few minutes. All right. So minimal modeling represents every database as the list as the catalog of four objects: anchors, attributes, links, and secondary data. We don't have access, direct access to Twitter's database. We don't know how it works, how many databases are there, what server software they use, and so on. But we can kind of deduce the data schema that they use. So first we begin with anchors, because both attributes and links depend on the anchors for the for everything. As in every social network, the first obvious anchor is the user. So let's write it down here. So we have three tables here. They implemented as Notion databases. That the term table and the term database is going to be overloaded here, but well, I guess that's gonna be okay. I've added ID example here, but we won't be able to fill it in for every anchor. Also, description for most anchors is going to be kind of pretty straightforward and obvious, so we're not gonna fill it in for now. So we have a user. The second obvious anchor that we have is a tweet. So let's add it. The ID example here, actually, it's we can provide that. So Twitter uses very long integers for that, and we have direct access to those IDs. All right. Again, description is straightforward. Remarks are also straightforward. I mean, we don't have anything to say for now. So the first attribute that we can probably add is the name of the user. So we know that for every user, we have this like a alphanumeric string, and we know that this string could be changed. So let's put it like this: user __ name. It refers to the because those three tables are databases in Notion, and you can refer to the to other list, and it's going to be useful later when we will have more attributes and more links. So type is probably string, and the question is a description of what what is contained in this attribute. What is the name of the user? So we use questions to describe the meaning of the attributes. Why questions? In this simple case, you could use something like username or a name of the user. But it turns out that first, there are some attributes, for example, Boolean attributes. Is this user an admin? Is this post active or something like that? And also it turns out that in a very, in some more complicated cases, asking a question about what's stored in the attributes is more revealing than just trying to explain as a kind of as a sentence. I don't know. Great. Next thing that we can see in this tweet is probably its timestamp. But here it's a bit this you cannot control this timestamp. You cannot change it. It basically records the time when this tweet was created. All right. It basically records the time when this tweet was created. So in minimal modeling, we treat the timestamps in a special way. We don't treat them as attributes. And that's and we can add something like this, has created at timestamp. And this timestamp is going to be yeah, and this timestamp is going to sorry, I'm talking about tweet. Right. Next thing that we see is likes. So users can like tweets, and this is the first example of the link. So we add user likes tweet. First anchor is going to be user. Second anchor is going to be tweet. Cardinality. So there are only 3 useful cardinality numbers so far. It's and here like one tweet could be liked by many users, and user can like many tweets. So it's going to be M to N. We're going to create it here. What's next? Retweets. So there are 2 ways to retweet a tweet. You can do the normal retweet, and you can do a quote retweet, where you can add some comment to the tweet that you are retweeting. And we know from the way, one thing how we can observe how Twitter works is by looking at its API definition, and we're gonna look at that a bit later. And we know that each retweet is basically a tweet, but it may not have the text. It's gonna be empty. I don't know how it's implemented, because this is visible from some of the from some responses of Twitter API. So in other words, tweet can be a retweet of a different of another tweet. So let's write it down. Tweet is a RT of tweet. So we have 2 anchors here. right. Cardinality. So one tweet could be retweeted by many, but one tweet can retweet only one, right? So it's going to be 1 to n. What's next? We see that you can reply to another tweet, of course. So we can add another link. Tweet is a reply of tweet. And again, we have, we can have, and again, it's 1 to n because there could be multiple replies, and you can reply for only one tweet, and so on and so on. Right. One other thing that we can do is we can bookmark it, right? Tweet added to your bookmarks. So now we have another link that says user bookmarked tweet. And we have a user, and we have tweet. And we know that it's like user can bookmark multiple tweets, and one tweet can be bookmarked by multiple users. So it's going to be m to n. All right. We can now take a look at the, I'm going to take a look at the chat. There is no activity there. We can now take a look at the Twitter API and see what they have, what they give us for the tweet. So ID, yeah, we know about that. Text, text, right. This is another pretty obvious attribute that we have. Tweet text. The anchor is going to be tweet. Type is a string. What is the text of the tweet? There is this editing history, which not everyone has, as far as I understand. We have attachments, right? We know that you can attach polls to your tweets, and you can attach pictures. We're going to model that. We have author ID. We already registered that as the no, we didn't. That's like super important. User is an author of tweet. And we have user, and we have tweet. And user can be an author of multiple tweets, and tweet belongs only to a single user. So we have 1 to n here. Context annotations, I don't even know what that means. Conversation ID, it's interesting. We're gonna talk about that. Creation time of the tweet. So we don't have an attribute per se, but we record the timestamp somewhere during the creation of a I don't know, row that contains the tweet. Edit controls is something that how much longer the tweet can be edited. Okay. Entities is something that happens during parsing. We're going to discuss that separately. If the represented tweet is a reply, this field will contain the original tweet author ID. We recorded that as the tweet is a reply. Language. So this is an example of something that is not not an attribute in minimal modeling. This is the secondary data, because language completely depends on the text of the tweet. And if you hypothetically can, right, you can edit that. If you can edit that, then the language changes, right? So if we had an access to the database, we would keep it in the this is probably recorded somewhere in the field, right? Because you can, of course, you can calculate that in flight, right? Every time when you need that, but it's going to be, maybe it's going to be too slow. So you probably have that data stored in a cached form. And that's going to be the secondary data, what we call secondary data. So this is going to be some kind of a column somewhere where you have an ID of a tweet and it contains the language. I don't know. Non-public engaging metrics, organic, possibly sensitive, promoted metrics, referenced tweets. If the parent is retweet, it will include, okay, something like that. Reply settings. Show who can reply to a given tweet, right? So we actually have that, right? Because here, when we begin to enter the text, we can change, everyone can reply to people you follow and only people you mention, right? Let's edit. So we have tweet who can reply. We have tweet. We have enum. We're gonna describe that later. Who can reply to that tweet? Source, the name of the app the user tweeted from. All right. New tweet source. Tweet string. What was the name of the client app? Right. So in like 17 minutes, we have two anchors for attributes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 links, and we have like a bit of a to-do list for some more at least some links. Let me check the chat. There is no activity. All right, let's talk about attachments. So we know that we can choose audience, everyone Twitter circle. Interesting. We're gonna talk about that. Doesn't source behave like created ID? Not really. Even though this value doesn't change in our workflow, it's not about the why timestamps are special. It's not about that they don't change. It's that they. So we call that like the name that we use for things like that is audit columns. And that's primarily timestamps because timestamps are everywhere. And if you just if you had to add every timestamp as the attribute, you will just have like more than a half attributes are just going to be timestamp, timestamp, timestamp of a different kind, different kinds. So we kind of like sweep them in the anchor or in the link, because of course you also somewhere you probably track the time when the link was created. So I liked the tweet at a certain timestamp, right? Source doesn't change in the default Twitter workflow, but kind of conceptually we don't care. We just think that this is like because in a sense, for example, like text of the tweet also doesn't change. Well, it didn't change until some time ago. So yeah. Another example of audit column is something like changed by, approved by, and IP addresses and so on. So some kind of information that records who did the change, like which person, where from, when, maybe even kind of a reason for approval. Such things are common in more like regulated environments like financial and so on and so on. So we have we can attach media, right? And we know that we can attach multiple pictures to the same to the tweet. So let's write that down. So we have the image anchor. The ID is somewhere. I'm not sure if we can see that. Description is a picture attachments. And the link that it has, that it is a tweet contains attachments, images. So we have tweet and we have image, and one tweet can contain many images, so it's going to be 1 to n. Here is another maybe a bit unusual approach. How do we store the image itself, right? So actually we store it as the as an attribute. So the binary file that actually contains the image, we consider that the attribute. So we have an anchor image, and we have the type blob, and what is the binary contents of the image file. It doesn't necessarily mean that somewhere this image file is stored in some sort of a blob in the database, right? Although, of course, like many years ago, some people sometimes did that. At the same time, where other people stored images in the on the file system, and now, of course, everyone stores it in something like S3. I don't know how it works in Twitter, but of course they probably have some sort of blob storage. And this is fine because minimal model doesn't, I mean, works perfectly with something that is not strictly a kind of relational database. So if you have an S3 storage where you have some sort of URL, and when you request this URL, you're going to get the blob, that's good enough for us. And in the same way, if you're old school and you have some tiny service and you just keep the files in the file system and you have some ID and you put it in the file system using some /something/something/image.jpg, then it's also fine. So we know that there is going to be some ID here that we store in the database, and then we are going to store the actual contents in the somewhere as a blob. Right. By the way, speaking of images, so when you have an image, you for convenience to quickly render it, you have to know the width and height, and also probably the image format of the image, right? And those values are secondary data that is contained in the blob, right? So we do not add a image width here because this is strictly speaking secondary data. We're gonna, of course, we store that in the database, probably like if we just have a tiny service that has some kind of images, the images table, it's going to have ID, width, height, and the image format. Is it animated, and maybe the size of the blob for kind of to show the size of the picture to the user or something like that. So tweet contains images, image contains blobs, but one thing that we also know about the images is that it can have image description, right? So the alt text. So this one we can add alt text image string. What is the human readable description of the image? Right. So let's add maybe one more case and then just discuss what is it that we can see here. So let's add some poll. So what is your favorite normal form? Third, fifth, and sixth. And we have the poll length, right? How do we store all the data? Question in the chat. How alt text differs from width or height? It's kind of also secondary attribute. Alt text is provided by the users. It's not generated from the image. It's just something that you type during when you attach the image. So what we see here, first we have poll choices. Second, we have poll length. So poll length is a property of the tweet. So we add tweet poll length tweet maybe even, I don't know, duration, although they use the term length. Interesting. Okay. Length is so this is probably going to be a number. I don't know. What is the duration of the whole? All right. Right. And the second, we have the choices. So there could be many choices, and that means that it's gonna be anchor. So let's add another one, all choice. We don't know how ID looks. The description is obvious. And we have a link. Tweet contains all choices. Tweet all choice. One tweet can contain multiple poll choices. So we record that. Question in the chat. Why don't we introduce poll as a separate entity? And how do we record the fact that poll choices are ordered? Great questions. I was going to talk about why poll is not a separate entity. So we don't like, if you come from relational modeling, you're used to having one-to-one cardinality of the relation, right? And probably here you would have, like, if you would design that as a, how do you say that, like a teaching level relational table, we're going to have table tweets and we're going to have table polls, because and the number of rows in the table polls is going to be much smaller, of course. So we don't like that in minimal modeling. We there are this is I'm going to try to write it down in the Substack, because it's still kind of hard for me to quickly explain that, because there are many counterexamples to that. Because first, of course, everyone is conditioned by relational modeling. Second, sometimes the criteria is like this. If an anchor cannot exist without another anchor, then it's not an anchor. So if the poll cannot exist without a tweet, then poll cannot be an entry. But you may ask, if we have a typical social network where we have post and we have comments, comments also cannot exist without the post, right? But here the rule is that there could be many comments, but poll can be only one or zero, right? So at the same time, nothing prevents you from keeping the tweets and polls in different physical tables. That's completely fine. So you can use the normal, commonly accepted practices of relational modeling, but for minimal modeling, you can try and like don't bring in relational model and the physical model too much, because otherwise you will have something resembling the structure of the physical tables, and it's going to heavily influence you during the kind of modeling. But This is sometimes, yeah. So as I said, it's like there are many kind of counter examples to that, and the like counter arguments for that. But until kind of further, until if it's possible, then try to do that the recommended way. But again, you can model even like you can, your minimal model can look as you want, as is more convenient to you, because I actually understand that there could be cases where like the usual rule kind of applies, but it becomes really inconvenient to think in terms of the original anchor, right? I don't know how to say that. So that there are more kind of questions that arise here when you kind of think from the point of view of relational model, right? For example, maybe you would have some kind of sort of temptation to add an attribute that says like, does this tweet contain a poll, right? But the same how this is kind of handled in the relational model, you could if there are rows in the choices in the poll choices table that correspond to the tweet ID, then this tweet obviously contains the poll, right? So here in Twitter, we don't have any kind of title for the poll, separate title for the poll, because if we would have that, then this question, like, why don't we have a poll as a separate anchor, is going to be even more kind of it would be a better argument for making the poll a separate anchor. All right, I'm gonna try to I'm gonna try to explain my position in one of the Substack posts. Second question, I'm not sure if I answered, but yeah, did my best. How do we record the fact that poll choices are ordered? Great question. We're gonna have that as the poll choice position. Aha. We have poll choice, we have number. What is the position of the poll choice? All right. We can do one. Right. All right. One other thing that we can see, speaking about the timestamps, there is this feature for tweet scheduling, right? So we'll send that on sometime, right? This is going to be an attribute because this time is controlled by us and we can change it probably. I don't know if Twitter allows that, but I mean, if there is even a possibility. So, I mean, conceptual possibility. So we have tweet scheduled time or something like that. I don't know. Tweet date time when is the tweet scheduled at scheduled for, not sure. Well, let's get back to the API description. So we discussed attachments, we discussed polls, we skip edit history. Context annotations is a typical secondary, if I read it correctly, interests and hobbies, whatever. It's typical secondary data. So Twitter somehow decides what this tweet is about. We don't actually provide this data, and it decides it by looking at other properties of the tweet, such as timestamp, my overall history, probably words, images, and so on. Conversation ID. If I understand correctly, what conversation ID is, it's also kind of it's also secondary data. So it for a tweet that could be, I don't know, a reply to a quote retweet of a different tweet, the conversation is still going to be like this original tweet that and around which we have all of this activity. Edit controls is not something that we know. In reply to user ID. Right. What I was referenced tweets. It's also secondary data, and it's kind of interesting a little bit because this is taken from the we parse the text of the tweet, extract the list of URLs, find those that are actually links to the tweets, and we do something with them. But again, this cannot be directly changed. Show who can reply, source withheld, and so on. All right. So in 40 minutes, we had 4 anchors, like a dozen or maybe 10 attributes, and 3, 5, 7, 8 links. We can go to our, how do you do that? Right. We can go to the user page, and we can see here more kind of important, pretty straightforward attributes of the user. We have my username. Right. This is the username. This is my, I don't know how it's called, like the name. We have a description. We have my URL. It knows when I joined. We also have following and followers. We can now quickly write that down. So we have user name, string. What is the username of the user? We know that user follows user. So we have both anchors here. We have cardinality M to N. There are also more like networking links, like user blocks user, mutes, and something like that. a question in the chat. Users who poll are still missing the links. Right, right. So when you choose one of the options, we want to record that. So we have user chose poll choice. We have it 1 to n. Well, as you see, adding new role to this table, to this catalog of objects is really quick. If we would have access to the Twitter database, here we could add another column everywhere. So here in Anchor's catalog, we would have something like ID column, which would probably be in some sort of something that looks like relational database, at least. For links, the best way to describe links is probably to write a tiny SQL query that returns two IDs. So, for example, if it's gonna be, or if it would be an old school database, then we will have something like select user ID, tweet ID from likes. I would probably call the table likes. I don't know. Or you could have a more kind of more regularly named table like users like tweets or something like that. And for attributes, we just need to have kind of two columns: ID and the value of the attribute. I think that this week I'm going to write a post about how in minimal modeling how nulls are handled in minimal modeling, because we had this when we discussed the quote retweet, right? Retweets and quote retweets. So what happens when I quote retweet, I have a text, and if not, then what happens? So we can, of course, if we are looking at the typical relational table, then we can just add an empty string to the text of the retweeting tweet, right? But in minimal modeling, we just agree that an attribute can be set to something or it can be not set. And like strictly speaking, we don't have any nulls in minimal modeling. It's just called not set. But there are many different kind of concerns about that, and I'm just going to write that down. It's not a discussion for now. All right. So what we can now do with this, with all of this, right? So if there were more, we can write some texts that explain how this works. Like, for example, you're a new developer, you join Twitter, which is doesn't look like a good decision nowadays. And we want to explain how how the core part of the system works, right? So I would probably write. So now that I have this catalog, I can I can write a one-page text that just explains the very basics that you probably already know. So users, tweets, you can retweet, like, bookmark, you can follow other users, you can add images, you can add polls and so on. But now you can refer to this catalog from this text. So you can immediately go and see where in the database this data is stored. Maybe not even in the database, maybe it's some kind of I don't know, microservice, or maybe it requires much more explanation, like you write in one place, but you actually read from a different place, or you have like 3 different places where you can read it from, because one is more suited for serving tweets, another is better suited for analytics, and so on and so on. So it's the hour is over. Are there any more questions about what we just saw? Because otherwise I'm going to stop the recording and we can chat. Question in the chat, some word about Enum. Not much to say. You just kind of provide some sort of, like, in any notation that you that is kind of that works in your company, right? That maybe everyone writes in a certain programming language, and so everyone understands. So you can write, like, I don't know, everyone mentioned followers, yeah, following, I don't remember. You can even mark it as a code for this. Enums are interesting because sometimes you need to do more to more deeply investigate the list of enum variants that you have, because in many databases, as time goes, as years go by, the semantics of enums sometimes becomes like a bit confused. So enums are supposed to be mutually exclusive, right? But sometimes you have things like when you actually two different things are kind of combined in enums, or like enum can be set in enum can have a value, but if this value is set, then some other attribute needs to be set, or vice versa, or even a row in a different date in a different table needs to exist. This is we're looking at the physical database, right? In minimal modeling, well, there is no kind of established notation for that so far, and that's why we have the remarks column, actually. because for more complicated attributes, you can write a text and you can add the link in remarks that explains, and this text explains how it works. Back in 2021, I think, in Substack, I had a long series of a long discussion of how to handle either or data. And it turns and this is where I kind of showed how I approach this, like, if this enum is in a certain state, then some other data must exist, or vice versa, it must not exist, or how to deal with the cases where you have in a physical database, you have like enum value, certain enum value, but the other data contradicts this value. This is important, and this is exactly the place where this can be described. So I can send probably as a follow-up, I can send some links to this either or thing. We should probably model the relation between a user and the enum. Sorry, I don't get it. Maybe you can type that, Alexander, you can type that in the chat, or I can unmute and we can talk. Right.
Hello.
Yeah.
I mean that, so basically there should be some relation between a user, not a, so basically how a user becomes this everyone, or how a user becomes this a friend. So basically this is actually the property of a tweet is some enum. It's basically like a scope, but but a user should have some property, computable or not. So basically that reflects that the user, the current user, actually meets one of the scopes or not.
I'm not sure. I think that you just have a function that, like, I mean, in your in the backend, you have a function. Can this user reply to this tweet? And it accepts two arguments, user and the tweet. And if the tweet visibility is everyone, then yes. Otherwise, you check the list of followers. Otherwise, you check the list of usernames that are mentioned in the tweet, and that's it. You can, of course, you can cache this in a secondary data, but this doesn't need to be modeled here. All right. So I'm going to stop the. Yeah.